Welcome to the channel, Gaming Army. This drop finds us in our Hunchback. It is the clan variant, the Hunchback 2C. We are outfitted with 4 clan ER large lasers, 2 clan ER medium lasers. We have a nice speed of 64.8 kph, and we also have some jump jets for mobility. So we're going to go through a couple of drops here today in this build, and while we do so, we are going to address a very important question that I am continually asked, and that question is, how do I evaluate a mech and determine if it is a good build or not? So this is an important question. It's also a very complex question, and when I am done with this topic, I will have made it as clear as mud. So strap yourselves in and let's get started. So the first 2 things we need to break this down into when talking about builds on our mechs is metal and meat. So addressing the first part, the metal. This is the actual mech itself. And you'll want to pay attention to your end screens and the statistics that come up on the end screens. The game does tend to focus around kills and damage. So you can use that as kind of an indicator as to what you're doing. Look at that end screen, look at your kills, look at your damage, and ask yourself this question: does the match feel like it reflected that end score? So if the question is, you felt like you were getting a lot of work done and your score seems low, this may indicate that your mech lacks firepower, and you may want to check the weapon systems that you're running. Could also indicate a lack of time on target. In other words, you spent more time repositioning around the board or chasing the enemies and instead of shooting them. So take a look at that. The next thing you want to look at is your mech's performance, and this is where we talk about consistency. Do you have consistent performance, or is the mech's performance more indicative of situations or biome-based, map-based? In other words, the mech performs better on a cold biome, or you need flat open areas to really rack up the scores that you're anticipating. That indicates that it's good in certain situations, but it may not be well-versed for all. The next thing you want to take a look at is the loadout, and really question, is this mech the correct loadout for my playstyle, or can you adapt your playstyle to maximize a certain mech's loadout and performance to get as much out of the mech as possible? So ask yourself these important questions. Now, one of the gray areas is, what is the purpose of the mech or role of the mech? This one gets a little more muddy because it's going to bring some intangibles to the board. If your mech's role is a spotter and narking the enemy, you may not rack up huge damage scores at the end. For example, a Raven. You could be spotting the enemy, letting your team know where they're at, which is invaluable on the battlefield, narking them for LRMs and just to show position, and it may not translate into a high damage score at the end of the game. So be aware that kills and damage is a good place to start, but it may not reflect the whole of what's going on during the drops. Regardless of which way you approach this, consistency is going to be the key. And that is regardless of map, regardless of the situation. If you are consistently scoring a certain damage amount, that indicates that it's a good build, it's a stronger build, and it's not dependent on external factors to boost or maximize your performance. So speaking of performance, we have pushed into the center of the map. The enemy is a lot stronger at Delta 4 than I anticipated. It's not going to end well, and I am taken out. But we finished the match out with 4 assists, 593 damage done. Moving on to our next drop. This one finds us playing domination mode on Grim Plexus. And we are going to continue our discussion with the second element, and that is the meat. In other words, we're talking about the human element and pilot skill. And I'm going to say this next thing with as much kindness and love as possible, but please take this to heart. A low N score may not be the fault of the mech. It might be the fault of the pilot. So you need to be objective in gauging your performance as well as the mechs. And to do this, we're going to go back to the end screen, back to those statistics. Yes, we continue to focus on kills and damage because so much of the game hinges on that. But you'll want to look at how you did. Now I know the next question is, how do I know how I did? Well, when I first started out, somebody very wise gave me the following formula to use. It's a good barometer to get you dialed in on personal performance. And that formula goes something like this. Your damage score should be 5 times your max weight. So using that, a 20-ton mech should be looking to get at least 100 damage. And a 100-ton assault mech, you should be somewhere around 500 damage done. So that'll help give you a little bit of an inkling as to how you're doing personally. Again, check that end score end screen. Look at your damage. See where that falls within the team cohesion. Were you one of the top damage dealers, or were you on the bottom? And how does that coincide with how the drop felt? Do you feel like you were getting a lot of work done or not? So use those things to gauge your proficiency as a pilot. Keeping in mind, once again, end score doesn't always reflect the level of contribution that you put into a match or how much help you are to the team. So take all of this with a grain of salt. Hopefully that barometer helps some of the newer pilots out there knowing where they fit in the grand scheme of things. So for example, if you've been watching these drops, my Hunchback 2C has been doing what I felt is a decent amount of work getting damage done, focusing enemies. We've had a couple of really good matches in good positions, utilizing those large lasers, minimizing the exposure of our mech, and trying to get a lot of damage done on the enemies. Now, I had pushed out to this right side early in the game just because I kept noticing LRMs coming out of the Gulf 7, Gulf 8 area. I also noticed some lasers early on out towards Gulf 5, and I wanted to put some suppression fire down on those specific units. Now the battlefield has tightened up somewhat. We're using our jump jets to get around and spy and spot enemy units like a damaged Raven. I had seen him earlier, and I just needed to get the angle on him to do some additional damage. And there's lots of fire coming from around the corner, so I've got to be careful peeking and poking with this one. But I want to put my large lasers to use, and doing things like shooting exposed rabbit ears on catapults is a great tactic. He can't shoot back, and those open bay doors are exposed quite readily. So keep an eye out for things like this on the battlefield. My team seems to be pushing straight forward now. We're on a roll, 8-2. This is just kind of a mop-up operation at this point. I still don't want to needlessly expose my mech just because the Hunchback 2C is not the tank monster of the Inner Sphere Hunchback, so I do want to be careful, but I also want to contribute to the team as well. So now we're just hunting down the last of the enemy units. He's up here on the hill. I'm not going to get him in time. He's on the other side of the building. But we finish this drop out with 9 assists, 595 damage done. And that plays directly into what we talked about, consistency in performance. Hope this one helps you out. If it does, make sure you leave a like and subscribe down below.